Hi, and welcome to LakeView Listens, Lakeview Lutheran Church's monthly podcast. Each month, we are here to provide space for experiences, ideas, and people that have significant impact on our communities, both large and small. Through these conversations, we hope to inspire, empower, and enlighten you, the listener. I'm your host, Zachariah Schmidt, on staff at Lakeview Lutheran. And today I'm here for episode 10 of Lakeview Listens with Grace Zelle. And if you're not familiar with Grace, Grace is my younger sister and one of the most beautiful people that I know. So I'm super excited for you to be here and for us to chat for a little bit. Thanks so much for being here.
You're so kind. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to talk with you today.
So I should just say, but I don't think we've talked in person since maybe once. But I'll just say again for the audience, you graduated with your master's a couple weekends ago. So I just wanted to say congratulations. Graduated with your master's in environmental law, if I'm getting that correctly.
Yep.
Yes. How does it feel to be all graduated in possession of a master's degree?
Well, I'm not really sure yet. I don't feel like it's sunk in yet. I do have 2 more courses for the summer. Yeah, it's been a busy year, so I'm excited to kind of wind down now.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So you're in New Orleans, and you came down to New Orleans, I think, was it 2015 when you first went down for undergrad? Is that right?
Yep.
2015, and then graduated in 2019, and then you were back up in Chicago for about a year during the pandemic. Do I have that right? Or a couple of years, maybe.
Yeah, so I was back up in Chicago from like mid 2019 to mid 2021. So a couple years.
Okay. And then a couple of years, and then you went back down to New Orleans, which is where you are now. Can you talk a little bit about just what drew you to New Orleans in the first place when you first went down in 2015 for school? Obviously, part of it was the decision was to go to school there, but why New Orleans in the first place, and then why, after being in Chicago for those couple of years, what made you decide to move back down there?
Yeah, I think initially when my decision in 2015 was, again, like you said, to go to Loyola for college. And I think I remember my decision, my 2 final schools were between Loyola Chicago and Loyola New Orleans. And I think ultimately I decided to go with New Orleans because I wanted to try something different and kind of push myself out of my comfort zone of living in Chicago for 18 years at that point. And New Orleans, kind of speaks for itself. It's such an interesting city and really unlike anywhere else. And when my dad and I went down to visit, it really just kind of captivated me and drew me in. And the campus is so beautiful and the city is so unique and interesting. And that's kind of what led me to my decision to go down there in the first place. Coming back down in 2021 was largely motivated by a job and a relationship. So I had been working as a barista after I graduated college until the pandemic hit, and then the restaurant closed down and then everything was closed down. So during that time between 2020, March of 2020 and April of 2021, I was doing an internship at Friends of the Chicago River, but also looking for more long-time work. So I ended up applying to an organization in New Orleans called SBP, formerly the St. Bernard Project. and that was an AmeriCorps position of a client service coordinator. So I ended up being offered that position. At the same time, I was offered another position to work at the Friends of the Chicago River Museum in Chicago. So I had two job offers at the same time, and was kind of had to choose between New Orleans and Chicago at that point. And the other factor of it was my boyfriend Warren who I met in college, was living in New Orleans at the time. So I wanted to continue that relationship and be in the same state again. So that was kind of what led me to come back down to New Orleans, which I'm really happy that I did, because I feel like in college, like I only experienced like a surface level of New Orleans, and being back down here for 3 years now has really given me like the room to experience like the complexity of the city in like so many different ways that I hadn't experienced before. So yeah, that's what led me down here, and that's why I'm currently still here.
Yeah, it's really from my own experience at the university in a couple of different places. It really is quite a different experience being at school in a city and just living in a city outside of school. When you're kind of like you were saying, when you're in school, you have a little bit of a surface knowledge of whatever city you're living in. You're really just going to one place, and I mean, obviously, you're exploring the city at times, but your focus is really on your studies. So it really is. I can imagine, especially in a place like New Orleans, all the complexities, all the culture, all the different things that there are to explore down there really open up once you were out of school. Um, Completely forgotten that uh, you did that internship with Friends of the Chicago River. Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yes, would love to. I feel like that experience was really, really instrumental in kind of leading me down the path that I'm on now. So I worked with Chelsea Grassfield at Friends of the Chicago River. She was the policy director at the organization. And I was, at the time, I was looking for some jobs, and really kind of wasn't sure of like the path that I wanted to go down. Like I was interested in a lot of different things, but wasn't sure exactly like where I should go with that or what subjects I should lean into. So I was doing a lot of informational interviews where I just like talked to people who had the jobs currently that I was interested in, and just kind of understanding like what they do and like how they got there. So I was talking to Chelsea. I did an informational interview with Chelsea, and it ended up turning into an internship for a year. And it was really kind of like loosely structured. So I was able to like choose what projects I wanted to work on and things like that. And it was also during the pandemic. So there's limited things I could do at that point. But my biggest project was I wrote a long paper and did a lot of research about environmental gentrification in Chicago, which is essentially just like what the impacts are of building new green spaces and like working on the environment and like what the impacts of that are on low income communities and communities that have been historically underfunded and underinvested in. And one of the examples of those that is really prevalent in Chicago is the 606 Greenway, I think it's called. But you could see there, because it's a really long, beautiful trail with a lot of green spaces and a lot of really cool native plants and things like that, and just like really important areas for people to go and experience nature. But you could see that because it was so long, it went through so many different neighborhoods, and one of them was a wealthier and whiter neighborhood, and the other one was more low income and more Latino and Black communities. And you could see almost instantly that the housing prices in the lower income neighborhood like immediately shot up, and developers immediately started moving in and taking over some like apartments and changing like 3 to 4 family like apartments into just like one family buildings and things like that. So I feel like that project and my work at Friends of the Chicago River as an intern was really, really influential in like kind of tying all of my interests of like environmentalism and climate change into tying that into like work with communities that have been historically underfunded and disinvested in, and just a lot of those different areas that you can kind of wrap up into environmental justice. So I feel like that really kind of led me to my work at the St. Bernard Project, and then getting my master's at in environmental law.
Sure. Yeah, it's so interesting because I think, climate change is really one of the really big issues in our world in 2024. And I think that most people, when they think about climate change, very often you don't think about who it's impacting the most and who it's impacting the most severely. So I think what you were just saying about gentrification and projects that are happening and being created are often not often taken into consideration who is getting kind of the short end of the stick, let's say. So I can imagine that was real eye-opening in a lot of ways, and really, yeah, I'm sure solidified your interest in bringing together a bunch of your different interests into a job, and kind of solidifying, what you wanted to do and the projects that you wanted to work on. Yeah. So now you're in New Orleans. So I just want to just talk about the city for a second. And just for anyone who's listening, I think if you haven't been to New Orleans before and you want to take a vacation, New Orleans is one of the places I would highly recommend. I feel like every time I come and visit, it's just it just is, I fall more and more in love with the city. I always say if there's one place I could live outside of Chicago, it would probably be New Orleans. It's just such an incredible city. What are kind of some of the things that you've grown to really enjoy about the city, outside of, like we were talking about a minute ago, once you became a little bit more invested in the areas of the city that you weren't able to during school?
Yeah. I mean, just so many things. I feel like Louisiana as a whole is such an interesting place and a really complex place. And then when you kind of focus in on New Orleans, like so many of those complexities and so much of the beauty of this area, like you can find just within New Orleans. I think the history of New Orleans and Louisiana itself is so interesting. There's like so many different, and of course, like all of this is tied into like colonialism and like the destruction of communities that were already there, and like the violence against like Black and brown people and all that stuff. But they're like, now there's so many different cultures and so many different like histories in the city that are still like very prevalent today. And you can see that through the architecture. You can see that through the food. You can see that like just walking block to block. And I think the people here, it's really like a culture I've never experienced. Like you walk down the street and you say hi to everyone, and you just say, how you doing? And like being back in like Chicago or other places, like you walk down the street and like you don't really say hi to people, and like that, it always throws me off just like between the two because I've gotten so used to it here. But just like the music and the food and the architecture and everything combined, and just again like the resilience of the city. Um, I feel like a little bit weird about the word resilient because like it can be so overused when people like don't want to be like don't want to be have to be resilient anymore. But like in that of itself, like the city is resilient. Like not me personally, but the city experienced Hurricane Katrina and like was able to come back from that. Obviously not in the same way, but like it's just like a city that refuses to like kind of just fall into the Gulf. And yeah, there's so many things that I love about the city, and just like being able to walk around and like see a brass band just like walking down the street and playing music is so beautiful, and like Jazz Fest and Mardi Gras and everything like that. And I think the food is also just like incomparable. But those are just some of the things that like drew me in and kind of refused to let me go a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, I was gonna say it was because the time that I lived in Atlanta was is so similar, just in I mean a lot of different aspects of the culture, but the walking down the street and just people saying hi to you and you saying hi back, and um, even if it's just surface level warmth, just kind of that back and forth, and yeah, just kind of that friendliness, even if it is just on a surface level that you don't get in up in the north.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I do think there's from the 4 or 5 times that I've visited New Orleans, it kind of seems to me like there's no place in the world like there is in New Orleans, and just some of the things you were speaking to, the food and the music and the culture, and just the things that you encounter as soon as you step out your front door and you walk down the street, and it's really just pretty incredible. So I can totally get why it's kind of grabs hold of people and doesn't want to let them go, and just some of the things you were speaking about, and the resilience of the people and resilience of the places is also just pretty incredible. Um, so you mentioned just a little bit ago, the work with SBT, and that's still what you're doing right now. So you've been there about 3 years, is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what kind of work are you doing with them at the moment?
Yeah. So SBP largely, well, we started as a organization to rebuild homes and repair homes after hurricanes and natural disasters. And since then have kind of expanded into this nationwide organization, where we're still doing that build aspect of it, but also have included building affordable housing, and doing advise work to the government, and like doing prepare work, and a lot of different things in the disaster world. So for me in particular, I started as an AmeriCorps member as a client service coordinator, and I actually started like a month before Hurricane Ida hit Southeast Louisiana in 2021. So at that point, my role was to communicate with homeowners and the clients that we have, getting them through our eligibility process, and then helping them through construction from start to finish. And so since then, I've kind of transitioned through a few different roles, but the role that I'm currently in is I work on SPP's Recovery Acceleration Fund, or RAF for short. And so That was a pilot program that SPP started in June of 2022, which feels so long ago at this point. But what that, and it's kind of convoluted, but I'll try to explain it really quickly. So after natural disasters, like really big ones like Hurricane Ida in Louisiana, states and communities can potentially will receive community development block grant development, disaster recovery grants from Congress. And so those funds will be used by like the states and other receiving entities to like build out like bigger long-term recovery programs that are run like through the states. So the only problem with that is that because it's coming through Congress and has to be like allocated through HUD and everything, it takes years for it to get started. So SVP developed the RAF program to be able to like utilize these funds before they're available for homeowners in order to like shrink that time between disaster and recovery. So the way that it works is we find homeowners who are eligible and just like mirror the state process, and then we take out loans through one of our partners to fund the cost of recovery for the homeowners, and then they'll be able to move back into their home without having to live in like mold and like unsafe conditions. And then by the time that state program is up and running, like a few years down the line, then the homeowners will apply to the state program for reimbursement and then use the reimbursement funds to pay off the loan. So that's the program that I'm working on now. And again, we started it in Louisiana and it was successful. And we were able to bring 25 homeowners home from Hurricane Ida. And just to kind of like give a snapshot of that, we were able to start construction on homes in 2022, like mid 2022. And we still have clients who haven't received their like grant awards back for the reimbursement. So like that's 2 years like given back to homeowners from the recovery. So because it was successful in Louisiana, we started it in Florida for Hurricane Ian in 2022. So that's what I'm working on now.
Gotcha. Yeah. So this organization started in Louisiana, like was based out of Louisiana initially. So I would imagine that that there would be more and more expansion in the years to come. I mean, I could be wrong, but feels like with the effects of climate change becoming more and more pronounced and hurricanes happening and tropical storms happening more and more frequently, that there'll be much greater need for organizations and support like this. So when you started initially with this organization, you were doing client services. Can you talk a little bit about that experience? Because I can imagine there would be some really rewarding moments in a position like that, but I'm also assuming a lot of really frustrating moments. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's very accurate. Yeah, so it's been quite the journey for me. Just even where to start. But yeah, definitely a very rewarding experience because you're, as a nonprofit organization, you're able to assist people in rebuilding their homes for free. And a lot of the clients that we have from Hurricane Ida experienced really intense damage. Like it was anywhere from like $30,000 worth of repairs up to like $100,000 worth of repairs. And like most of the clients that we have are like living off of like Social Security benefits or like maybe $700 a month. So it's like there's no way that they can afford repairing $90,000 worth of damage. So to be able to go out there and like offer like these free repairs for homeowners is a really cool thing to do. And especially in a state where the government is limited in their ability to assist. And these like state programs take so long to get off the ground, and the insurance companies are just like up and leaving and then denying claims left and right. So being able to kind of like fit into one of those gaps in Southeast Louisiana and like be able to provide assistance is a really cool thing to do. It's challenging work. It's not always the easiest thing to do, especially I think at the nonprofit that I'm at, and like many other like nonprofits that do this type of work. Because it's for free, we have to kind of like get creative with how we like structure the organization. So our organization focuses on, or like we utilize AmeriCorps members. We rely a lot on volunteer work. We have to rely on grants and things like that. And so when you're kind of combining all of those different factors that have so much variety to them, and like, it can't, like, you can't ever like guarantee the stability of it. It becomes really complicated, and like you're working with homeowners who are potentially going through like the worst times in their life, and like have experienced such a trauma of like losing their house or like losing everything that they owned and not being able to pay for that, and like going through a number of health issues and a number of family issues while trying to like understand where they need to live. And I think like for those of us who are so fortunate to like have never experienced such a storm that like destroys your house, like you don't really like think of how extreme that is to just be like, I don't know where I'm supposed to live, and I don't even know like where I'm supposed to begin. So it's a really delicate situation and a really complicated situation for homeowners to be in. So like it's a learning experience for sure to be able to come into these situations as someone who's never experienced this before, and someone who's not even from New Orleans, and really understand like how to present yourself in those situations, and how to balance all of the variety in that we could offer. And it's a really interesting experience. Really glad to have like to be able to do it, but definitely have learned a lot as I've gone through it as well.
Sure. Yeah. There's a lot there. I remember a few years back, I read this book. I think it's called The Water Will Come. And it's a nonfiction book. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's basically talking about the effects of the rising sea levels all around the world, and how much damage that does, especially to coastal cities and coastal communities. And I remember in this book, a lot of people who are living along the coast, it's like there's, they'll see these storms coming, these huge hurricanes, tropical storms, what have you, and just kind of refuse to leave because there's, it's your home, and it's like so many people, their identity is wrapped up in their home, because that's where you live, that's what you literally come home to. And so it's kind of like, if I don't have this, what else do I have? And so I'm going to go ahead and assume that that's probably the sentiment of a lot of people who have had their homes, decimated, affected by storms in New Orleans.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that's really unique about New Orleans and Louisiana, is that like so many of the clients that we had been in their houses for generations, and like even working in Florida now, it's like the amount of like homeowners who have lived there for years and years, it's not the same as New Orleans, so, like as I've seen so far, and just like being able to like maintain your home and like keep that place where your family has lived and grown for so many generations is just so important. And especially when it's like time and time again, you're like just battered by hurricanes and winds and these really heavy rains that come through, and just like, yeah, well, yeah, like you said, like so much of it is tied into like the culture of New Orleans, and like it's been really interesting to really kind of experience that at a greater level and understand like the ties that people have to this community and the ties that people have to their families within these communities, and understanding how that plays into like their experiences with hurricanes and evacuations and things like that.
Yeah, and it's especially when you have families and people that have been living there, like you said, for generations and generations. Um, you want to hold on even more.
Mm-hmm.
There, and like you were saying, there's got to be so much frustration and sadness and hurt and despair, I can imagine, for so many people who have their homes homes destroyed or partially wrecked. Um, do you find that there is we talked briefly about just the resilience of the city? Is there and especially in your early work in client services, did you feel like there was oftentimes a sense of, even if it was just a little bit of hope, or was it mostly just this is the worst thing that could possibly happen? I don't really know what I'm gonna do. There's not a lot of hope for me and my family.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we did experience a lot of just like, I don't, there's nothing for me to do. Like, I don't know what to do. And like, it's heartbreaking. Just to like see these communities go through this time and time again and like not really truly be supported by like the people that have been elected to support them. Um, but just like kind of understanding, like going through that process and being able to like bring people home and help them on their road to recovery, like it does like provide some hope, and like it shows like how like strong these communities are, and like how, and it is inspiring just like seeing how deep their connections to the city are, and not just New Orleans but the entirety of Southeast Louisiana. Like it's really interesting being in like a non-native here, because I've never been to a place where like so many people like are from here and have stayed here. Like Chicago, I feel like there's so many people who are from outside of Chicago, and like people leave and come back and all that stuff. But like New Orleans, like again, like you find people who have been with their families in the city for generations, and like yeah, they just keep coming back because they know that that's where their family is, and that's where their home is. And so for them to continuously want to like rebuild rather than like pack up and leave is, um, it's really cool to see, and just like understanding their love for their home and their community and everything like that. I think like that gives like me hope, and it gives our organization hope, and gives the communities around, it gives the communities who are impacted by it hope to see like them repairing their homes alongside their neighbors and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was gonna kind of be the next thing I was gonna ask, is things that inspire you in this position. And I can imagine, seeing people stick around and seeing people with roots that are, they go back generations and generations, and people fighting for their lives and fighting for their community is are things that are, inspirational. Are there other things that kind of I don't know, inspire you that are important to you to kind of keep doing this work? Because I know it's frustrating. It's brutal work at times. The work that you're doing. Are there other things that kind of keep you inspired, kind of keep you going when things get really bogged down and really heavy?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I think it does like consistently get really, really heavy. And like on top of that too, like, and I know I've mentioned this a few times, but like it's really disheartening to see like how the government is down here, and like how like deeply disinterested they are in like in I don't know, supporting their citizens. But I think I learned a lot from my master's program in environmental law because I'm really glad I did it because it was really like focused in Louisiana. But I think this might be a little bit of abstract, but I think it's been really, really cool to just see how interconnected life is. And like within that, one of the things I love about Louisiana is like its natural landscape and like the different ecosystems and habitats they have. Because like when you think about like, oh, I'm going to go experience nature, it's not typically like I'm going to go down to the swamps of Southeast Louisiana. Like I'd rather go to like the beach or like the mountains and things like that. But Louisiana is so interesting, and like the swamps that it has and like the wetlands that it maintains are just such incredible ecosystems and so crucial to the longevity of the state itself. So like understanding how like all of I'm getting too into the weeds here. Just like understanding
No, not at
at a
all.
basic level, like how like all of like the like ecosystems, like how each part of those contributes to the health and longevity of another part of it. And then going back into like Louisiana and like the communities of Southeast Louisiana itself, it's just like so much of it is so interconnected. And like I feel like with like the government that we have now and like the policies that we're engaging in and like just kind of where we're headed is like it seems to be kind of like focusing on the individual and the individuality of things. And like the South loves their individual freedom, but like that you don't get much of that without having like a strong community support. And so just like I think it's things like walking down the street and like being able to like converse with your neighbor and like just saying hi to a stranger and just like getting to know people like that down in the South. Like it's really important to like understand that relationship and like keep the relationship between communities and between your neighbor alive and well, because in a city where you're dealing with so many different things at so many different times. Like the weather is constantly like messing up your house and flooding your car, and the city is so underfunded, and there's so much going on with that, and like the oil and gas companies are still wreaking havoc on the wetlands down in Southeast Louisiana, and so it's just like understanding how much everything ties into each other and like understanding like the complexities of that. Yeah, I kind of lost track of your question. What
No,
was your
no,
question
you're
again?
good. I just want to. What did I say? Oh, just things that inspire you
Yeah.
to
So I think
continue
just
the work that you're
like
doing. No, but
understanding.
I liked where you go ahead.
I think yeah, because like Louisiana, like living in Louisiana and working in Louisiana, you don't often realize how tied in you are to like the ecosystem because like we're so close to the Gulf and we're surrounded by so many wetlands and so many natural areas, and like so many of the jobs and the ecosystems depend on that. Um, um, the jobs in the not the ecosystems, the economy and things like that. It all depends on like the health and well-being of the environment. And so when you think about that, it's like you have to maintain this in order to maintain that. And so just like understanding the work that people are doing in these different areas, I think is really inspiring. And just like knowing that you can't really achieve success, whatever that looks like, without being so interconnected. So it's just like you got to maintain those connections to each other and to your natural landscape, and just like understanding how people in Louisiana are so connected to their landscape. I think is really important, and it's been really cool to learn more about that. Sorry if that does not make any sense at all.
Sure. No, it did. It definitely did. And I was just a couple of points. Like I was gonna say, yeah, part of I can imagine that part of what makes the work maybe this might not make sense, but part of what makes your work so frustrating at times, I can imagine it's like two sides of the same coin, can also make it really inspiring. You know, the frustrating parts of not having enough funding and lawmakers making things really difficult for people. But then being part of this incredible community and seeing people kind of pull together, and just all what you were just saying about the physical landscape. So being witness to all this hardship and trauma, but then at the same time feeling like you're part of that community, is I can imagine part of the thing that kind of gets you going in the morning. And like you said, I really like what you said about the South loving their individual freedoms, and I think that's such a where so much of our country is at right now, and is being encouraged right now, is, you know, let me do whatever I want to do, and leave me the hell alone, and you know, let me just take care of myself and look out for myself, and you know, not focusing on you know, what pulls us together, and not focusing on creating communities that are strong and vibrant. So to kind of go back, even though it can be really frustrating to see all this hardship, like I said, I can also imagine that being witness to these really intense and vibrant and special communities is something that is that I can imagine is really helpful in the work that you do.
Yeah, because it's like, even despite the challenges, like the communities are still here, and they're still rebuilding, and they're still making incredible food, and making incredible music, making incredible art. And like, it's when getting like bogged down in the work of it all, it's nice to see, like, going to Jazz Fest and being like, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And like, despite all of these things that are occurring, like, they're still here, and they're still producing such beautiful things. And
Can you talk just a little bit about in the few years that you've been doing this work, how you have evolved, how your views and how your perspectives have evolved from when you know, day one on this job to where you are now?
Yes. I think I've grown a lot, I think, will be my go-to answer. Yeah, I think, like, when I started, I was very anxious to talk to people, and like, that was my whole job. So it's kind of just like plunging into the deep end. But I think doing that and being outside of my comfort zone, it really forced me to challenge my own perceptions of the world in general, but also like my understanding of like who I am in the world and how I exist in different communities, and like how my own experience as a white woman from Chicago with like a supporting and loving family differs from other people's experiences, and like how that kind of changes my I don't know, perception of life, and like how I exist in the world. And then again, like learning more about like with the environment of Louisiana. Like it's really like a beautiful place. And I think within that, like you can kind of, and again, this might be getting a little off, like, I don't know, too into the weeds or something. But I think like living in the North, you can easily dismiss Louisiana as like that state sucks. Like they're deep red, they're ranked 50th at the at everything, and just like kind of write it off. But just like being within the state, it's like okay, it's not as easy as it seems. Like there is no black and white. Like everything is gray. There's no like I don't know. There's so many different complexities, and like so much of the like learning about so much of the history and like how everything is interconnected and how one decision turns into like something else. It's just like learning about like individual experiences within this complex environment, and then using that to kind of challenge my own perceptions of like myself, of my neighbors, my community members, like the state of Louisiana itself, and then the world as well. And just really kind of like taking those experiences and like continuing to challenge like my own perceptions and my own existence, and like using that to move forward in a more like positive and meaningful way. And I think like I've touched on this a number of times, but I think like one of the most important things I've learned is that like you can't really do much with individual liberties and individual freedoms if you don't have like a strong community basis. Like just like the push for individual like liberty in the South is frustrating, because you're stripping back so many different things, and then just being like, okay, do you want to just exist as an individual in the world with like no support and like nothing? You just like are free to do whatever. It's like that doesn't really work, and it's not realistic, and like it's much more meaningful and like creates such a more like beautiful place to exist when like you have strong connections between your family and your communities and your environment. So I think those are some of the things I learned.
Yeah. I mean, it's I've I kind of have over the years learned that one of the things that we don't do so well in the country that we live in is ask why. So I think there's a lot of people that say, well, this is this way, and this is this way, and this is why we have to do this, or this is why we have to do this, and then instituting these really horrible policies and these really backwards policies, without looking at the context, and without looking at why is this the way that it is. And then, like you were saying, it's really easy if you do that, if you just focus on individual freedoms if you don't ask the why question and try to figure out the complexities, then it is really, really easy to just dismiss entire groups of people and to dismiss entire communities. But being able to look at the complexities of communities, of individual people, of entire groups of people, and understand, or try to understand at least, what makes people tick, and just kind of try to learn about all the intricacies of communities and cities is just a really important thing that I think we don't do super well in this country and across large areas in the South, for sure.
Yeah.
It's
yeah, I think it's a good way to put it.
Yeah, you're doing a lot of real good work. A lot of really hard work. Anyways, but I thank you so much for taking the time and being here. There's a lot there, and a lot of hard work again that you're doing, and just a lot of good stuff there. Thanks for being here, and appreciate you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for doing this. I love you.
I love you too. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.